Hello friends. This is Marvel Fiction. How are you all? So in this video, we will see, what if Avengers and Percy Jackson teamed up to save Earth against Loki? But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video. The cheers were muffled by the water, and so was the yelling. In the water all seemed silent, peaceful. Percy liked it that way. The chemical-filled liquid parted around him as he sliced through it with great skill, making a flurry of water break the surface as he kicked furiously. The tiled wall of the pool came into view and he reached his hand out to slam his palm against the metal sensor. Last year Percy had joined the good high school swim team, and then from there he had gotten picked out for the New York Monarchs. It gave him extra credit towards graduation and got him spied out by talent scouts. Percy had decided not long ago he may as well use his talents to his advantage, and swimming was one of them. Not much of a surprise. Really. Even without breathing in the water or messing with the water currents, he was far faster than anyone he versed. His coach offered him a hand out the pool. Up back on the tiles, he had his towel handed to him while his coach chattered away. Coach Tinner was the extremely cheery and excitable coach of the good swim team. Fantastic, Percy. He sat him down on a bench next to his teammates who all congratulated him, nearly all of them. Another win. I've been watching that NYU talent scout through all your events. You're sure to get in. Percy had entered 5 events through the course of the day and won all of them. His coach had already warned him that with it the start of a new school year, the talent scouts would be prowling in an attempt to find someone to hand out their scholarships to. The son of Poseidon spotted the man sitting up high on the bleachers, yellow lawyer pad resting on his knees. Behind him, though, were 2 men. One was a tall blond man who wore a simple blue shirt and khakis, face shadowed by a hat, and the other was a rather professional-looking man wearing a purple button-up shirt and plain long pants. Percy couldn't help but smile. Bruce and Steve had said they'd wanted to see him swim for some time, ever since he had come into the tower after making the Monarchs. After Hecate's attack of New York 2 months ago, Percy had gotten closer to the Avengers. Well, closer than he had first expected. All right. Hit the showers. I want you looking all pretty for the newspaper photos. Coach Tinner clapped his bony hands together. The changing rooms were filled with all the swimmers in the day's events. Percy grabbed a fresh towel from his bag, some clothes and his phone. His mum hadn't been able to make it because she was visiting a friend who was in the city, and seeing as it was a school day, Paul was teaching classes. Tony had given him the latest version of the Stark Industries phone, advertised to be released in 3 months. Percy honestly hadn't wanted it, but apparently it was that or they shine a fish symbol up into the sky whenever they needed him. For some reasons this phone didn't attract monsters, not that Percy was complaining. Hey, Mum. He pressed the phone against his ear as he moved towards the shower stalls. How did you go? Sally asked through the phone. Won all my events. He ruffled up his hair as he spoke. Coach said the NYU talent scout looked interested in me. That's great. Sally sounded excited. I'm so proud of you. Thanks, Percy replied. He was heading over to a shower stall when the one person he despised the most in the world, not counting immortal beings and monsters, Daryl Garrison, blocked his path. Daryl used to be the star of the swim team before Percy decided to join. He had 2 cronies, Richard and Ron, who stood with him everywhere he went. I'll talk to you when I get home, CYA. Percy ended the call and glared at the man. Do you mind moving, Daryl? Is that a Stark one? Daryl eyed the glass phone. They aren't due out for months, and it's not like you'd be able to afford one. Percy glared at him and breathed in deeply to calm himself down. My girlfriend got it as a gift from Tony Stark. Now please move. He repeated the lie Bruce had told him to say. And why did she get the phone? Daryl asked. Did Annabelle steal it off him? Wouldn't be surprised. Everyone of the good swim team knew about the arguments Daryl and Percy would get into. They had never been physical before, but they had come close. They all crowded around, waiting to see if anyone would throw a punch. In turn, all the boys from the other schools decided to peek in. First off, it's Annabeth. Second, Annabeth did not steal it. She's an apprentice for the architect firm he uses. Another lie. Tony had actually asked Annabeth to help him plan out a holiday house in Tahiti. Now move. When Daryl refused to budge Percy's side and pushed through the crowds. Daryl didn't like that though. He nodded to Ron, who, accidentally tripped him. The phone went flying from his hand and skidded across the floor. His clothes fell from his hands and right into a puddle of pool water. "What is your problem, Daryl?" Percy asked as he stood and clumped his wet clothes beneath his arm. He walked over to a boy from some random school who had picked up his phone and took it from him. Not getting a response, he turned away and began stalking towards the shower. "Good luck with that talent scout, Jackson," Daryl called after him. "I'd be surprised if they let you in. I hear they have a 'no poor person allowed' policy." Reining in his anger, Percy continued towards the stall. "No response?" Daryl jeered. "So it must be true." "No, I just can't be bothered wasting my time on a wit like you." Percy turned around and smirked at Daryl before slamming the door of the stall shut. The shower calmed him down. Sometimes Percy couldn't help but want to punch something. Anger had always been his weak spot when it came to bullying. After he got changed, he exited the stall and went towards his bag. He noticed a bit of plastic sticking out from between the zips that certainly hadn't been there before. When he opened it, he realized someone had been in his bag and gotten the plastic of his swim clothes bag stuck in the zip. Ruffling through his things, he realized his wallet was missing. "How did you score a chick like this, Jackson?" Daryl asked as he looked at the photo of Annabeth in his wallet. "And is that Huntress? Don't tell me Jackson has a crush?" "Give it back, Daryl." Percy moved towards his teammate. "Do you find her attractive? I know I'd do her any day." He pulled the photo from the plastic sleeve. "Hot piece of ass like that deserves." "She's my cousin." Percy breathed deeply as he snatched wallet out his Daryl's hand. "You really expect us to believe something like that?" he snorted. "You don't have to make up lies to impress us. No one likes you anyway." "Look around, Daryl. No one likes you either," Percy retorted as he took back the photo and left the change rooms. After the ceremonies for awards were done, Percy climbed up onto the bleachers and sat next to Bruce and Steve. "Good job," Bruce smiled. "Thanks." Percy smiled back as he stretched. "I have to go to camp this weekend. I won't be able to make games night." Percy, unlike the rest of the Avengers, stayed at his own house and would occasionally stop by the tower for dinner during the week. He spent most of his weekends at the tower doing various activities with a member of the superhero squad. With Hecaton monster attacks were few and it seemed rather silent out there in the villain world. "Will you still be coming to the benefit?" Steve asked. Percy wanted to roll his eyes. New York was throwing some sort of benefit for super rich snobby people, trying to worm money out of them for an emergency relief fund. Percy didn't want to walk around all night in stuffy armor and pretend to pay attention. "Bow ties aren't really my thing," Percy mumbled, watching as everyone cleared out. "It's masquerade. They made it like that just for you," Steve argued. "Tony even brought you a mask." "Even worse," Percy joked. "My mom has a friend from coming over for dinner tonight. I won't be able to go." "Have fun telling Fury that." They stood up and began walking towards the exit. What does he care? Percy had never actually had a proper conversation with the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. Is he going? They stopped next to the rather nondescript car that belonged to Bruce. "We're a team. We need to look like one. You can't just come for the fighting." Steve crossed his arms over his chest, a sign he meant business. "I kind of want to keep my secret identity, that's the deal. Going to a masquerade party and speaking like a teenager then hanging out with Talia might just give me away," Percy stated as he hefted his bag onto his shoulder. "I'll see you Monday." Steve didn't seem impressed and Percy flashed him an apologetic smile before beginning to walk home. It was 4 o'clock and his stomach was screaming for food. He knew that since his mom had a friend over, dinner would be earlier, and he whispered a silent thanks. "Hey Mom," he called as he entered the apartment. His mom was in the lounge room talking to Patricia, one of her friends who had moved to the West Coast. He had to deal with the awkward, "You've grown so much," and, "What a handsome boy he is," for at least 15 minutes before he was finally allowed to escape to his bedroom. Turning on his computer, a gift from Tony, who claimed no teenager should be as technologically withdrawn as he was, he sat down in front of it and checked that Annabeth was on Skype. Seeing she wasn't, he went to his bag and began pulling out his wet clothes. At around 5, dinner was served and Percy endured through the conversations. His mom and Patricia were talking about seeing a movie or something afterwards. "Do you want to come, Percy?" Sally asked her son. "I'll skip, thanks. I have some biology homework I need to do," Percy said, sending Paul a playful smile. After they left, Percy began Skyping Annabeth. all the while typing up a report painstakingly slowly on the computer. He needed to keep his grades up if he wanted to get a scholarship. Annabeth lived with her dad in San Francisco during the school year, so the internet and IMing was the only way they could stay in touch. What structures serve as anchors to hold the molluscans in place? Percy asked as he taped Riptide against his lip. I don't know, you're the fish boy, Annabeth replied. Google it. I've tried. Percy leaned back in his chair and looked at the pop-up box in the corner of his screen where Annabeth was doing her own homework. But all the floating words give me a headache. Poor Percy, Annabeth pouted. Do it later, I have sword fighting classes tomorrow, Percy complained, and it's due Monday. When did you get it? Annabeth asked skeptically. A week ago, Percy mumbled. Why didn't you do it then? Annabeth laughed. Tony needed help deciding what animals to get in his aquarium. He wanted to get eels, but eels tell horrible jokes kind of like bad stand-up comedians. Percy began to explain but realized he was beginning to ramble. I was busy. Maybe you shouldn't have stayed with them, Annabeth joked. It seems like such a busy job, deciding what animals to get in an aquarium. After the whole Hecate ordeal, Poseidon had told him it was up to Percy if he wanted to stay with the Avengers. Percy did it mostly for camp people. They wanted to have someone representing them and fighting the monsters they weren't allowed. It was actually an okay job, not that he got paid, but he didn't like the media attention it got him. Already numerous odd, origin stories had popped up. One person said he was the reincarnation of Achilles, another said he was made of seafoam like Pegasus. One even went as far to say a guardian of Earth that only appeared when it was in trouble. Well, do you know how annoying some fish are? His computer screen suddenly went black. Percy whacked the screen, trying to get it respond. Clicking wildly, he began fretting for his lost work. He bent down to check the power cords, but found them all plugged in and turned on. He was climbing out when he knocked his head on the desk. The son of Poseidon turned at the sudden smell of moonlace. Turning, he found the window was closed just like he left it. He knew it couldn't have been a passing smell from anything because moonlace was very distinctive. Going to the window, he noticed it was still locked and the fire escape was empty. Shrugging, he turned around, preparing himself to figure out what was wrong with his computer, but a sudden movement in the corner of his eye made him turn towards his closet. Stepping lightly, he gripped Riptide. There was an odd feeling running up and down his spine, like someone had just dropped an ice cube in his shirt. He swung open his cupboard door but saw no one inside. Rolling his eyes at his own stupidity, he turned and found himself inches away from Clint. Hades' underpants. Percy exclaimed as he stepped back. What are you doing in my room? How did you even get in? Window. Clint smirked. Hades' underpants. Percy blushed slightly. It's a Greek thing. Now get out, I have homework to do, if it's not already gone. Gods? Annabeth is going to kill me. Clint grabbed his arm and began dragging him out into the hall and towards the kitchen. Inside he found Natasha. Sending looks between the pair, he pulled his arm from Clint's grip. Come on. Percy noticed Natasha had something bundled under her arm. What are you holding? She chucked him the hoodie he kept at Stark Towers in case his armor got too damaged to wear. It was the same one that hid his face from view. I'm not going out. Percy began to walk back out of the kitchen. Yes, you are. Clint grabbed the scruff of his shirt and dragged him back. Fury's orders. Percy's eyes widened in realization. I'm not going to that benefit. He twisted out of Clint's grip yet again and swatted away his hands. And stop grabbing me. He walked back into the hall, leaving the assassins to find their own way out. Unfortunately, they seemed set on getting him to that benefit. Clint ran up the hall and tackled him to the ground, pinning his arms above his head. Get off. Percy squirmed away. Our orders where to get you. Clint spread his arms apart and Natasha forced his arms into the arms of the hoodie. I've never failed a mission yet, and I'm not starting now. The son of Poseidon's head was forced through the hole. He glared up at Clint, who was looking rather pleased with himself. Say I wasn't home. Say anything. I don't care. Percy attempted to wiggle out. Just don't make me go. The Avengers got invited to numerous benefits. Seeing as there were so many members of the team, they usually did a tag team. Natasha and Steve would go together, Tony and Bruce, and then Clint was reserved to go with Percy, but thankfully the need had never shown up. Clint climbed off him, but before he could even try to escape, Natasha yanked him up by his hood. We all have to go. I don't like it any more than you. Did Clint have to tackle you as well to make you go? Percy asked sarcastically as he was dragged behind Natasha back to his room. Clint opened the window and climbed out onto the fire escape, gesturing for Percy to follow. He did, but he was careful not to disturb the moonlace flowers on the window ledge. "He wishes," Natasha commented with a smirk while Clint just rolled his eyes. "Try not to yell too loudly." "What do you?" He soon figured out what they meant as a hard shove in the back sent him toppling over the fire escape and straight into Tony's waiting arms. Percy paled as he realized just how fast Tony was moving and the awkward and unsafe position he was in. "Put me down." Percy gripped onto his friend's arm tightly. "Why?" They were already nearing Stark Towers. "Not like you've never flown with me before." "I was prepared then." Tony landed on the balcony, not thrown of a fire escape. Tony put him down as the robots began going to work taking the suit off. Percy followed behind him, arms crossed over his chest. His mum was going to flip when she noticed him missing, and he was lucky Annabeth hadn't decided to IM him. He stalked into the lounge room and pointed a finger at Steve, who was wearing a suit and had another suit bag resting over his arm. "I'm not going," Percy said as he moved towards the elevator, too big of a risk. The elevator door opened to reveal Fury, who was looking rather amused by the whole situation. "We have SHIELD agents on the grounds, scanned everyone going to see if they have any connection to you, and even made sure there was no seafood. You're going." Fury crossed his arms over his chest. "Are you?" Percy asked, looking at the leather duster. "I have more pressing matters to attend to. I was in the area and decided to check personally if my two best agents had managed to get their mission complete." Fury looked at Percy. "I have important things as well." Percy tried to argue, but from all the looks everyone was giving him he knew he was fighting a losing battle. "Are you always this stubborn?" Bruce came out from a room on the side, purple mask in hand. "It's a family trait," Percy muttered. "Fine. I'll go to this stupid benefit, but if I have to dance I'm out of there. I need to call my mum first." Tony offered him the phone with a smug expression on his face. Fury nodded his leave and left. Punching in his home number, he left a message on the answering machine. "Hey Mum, I had to go out, but I'll be home around." He looked at Steve, who held up one finger. Percy covered the mouthpiece and said, "My curfew's 12. "You have a curfew?" Tony asked, looking amused. "Shut up," Percy replied before speaking into the phone. "I'll just crash at Tony's actually. I'll be back Sunday afternoon. Love you." Setting the phone down, he took the suit bag Steve offered him. Bruce then held out a half-face mask that would cover up to his nose. Frowning at it, he inspected the sea green fabric that was accented by gold on the outside. Going into the bathroom, he changed into the suit and frowned at the green handkerchief and black bow tie that came with it. "How did you know my size?" Percy asked as he came out of the bathroom, ruffling his hair. He didn't know Tony could change so quickly, but there he was, wearing a black suit, hair slicked back and sunglasses, red handkerchief folded in his pocket. "Not important." Tony chucked something towards him and he nimbly caught it. "Hair gel?" Percy didn't seem impressed. "What's this for?" "You see, when you want to look attractive, you use it to control your hair," Tony began explaining sarcastically. "I know what it does." Percy dumped him clothes on the couch and frowned down at his bow tie. "Why'd I need it?" "Because I say so." Tony walked up and grabbed Percy's bow tie. "Don't they teach you how to do these things in school?" "No." Percy didn't like the feel of the suit at all. Tony folded up the handkerchief and pushed into his pocket. "Do I need to put the hair gel in for you, or can you manage that yourself?" Tony asked sarcastically. Scowling, Percy put the hair gel in, not liking it at all. He supposed it would help him become less identifiable. The son of Poseidon grabbed the hoodie before entering the elevator and putting his mask on. Outside, a limousine was waiting, Clint, Natasha and Pepper already inside. "Happy. Meet Percy." Tony made gesture pairs between the driver and him. "Tony." Percy tried not to hit the man. "What the hell?" Tony just shrugged. "Happy's one of my friends. He won't tell a soul. Won't you, Happy?" "Scout's honor, sir," the driver commented. Percy pulled off the mask and rubbed his face, obviously not pleased with it. Pepper sent him an apologetic smile on behalf of her boyfriend, who was busy talking to Bruce on the latest paper published on quantum physics. Clint and Natasha were engrossed in a fast-paced conversation about guns from the sound of it. "Don't worry, these things aren't as boring as they sound." Pepper started to make conversation with him. Percy liked Pepper. She was kind and was strict when need be. When your ADHD things like this are extremely boring, Percy folded his arms over his chest. You'll be fine. Pepper flashed him a smile. Besides, I've always wanted to know what you'd look like in a suit. You look rather handsome. Percy blushed. I feel like a monkey. Grin and bear it, Tony commented. Mask on, the venue's coming up. Don't get close to screaming girls. Avoid people screaming your name, and try to avoid the underwear thrown at you. They throw underwear at you? Percy asked, appalled. Unfortunately, yes. Bruce frowned slightly as he put his own mask on. Everyone else followed suit. Steve was wearing a red, white and blue mask. Percy stifled some laughter. Natasha a black mask. Clint purple, Pepper red, and Tony a red and gold. Wondering who let Tony pick the masks, Percy stepped out the car and was bombarded the screaming and the flashing of the cameras. Have I mentioned I don't like being the center of attention? Percy muttered to Tony, who had gotten out next to him and was waving to the crowd. Once or twice, Tony flashed him a smirk. Just walk down the red carpet, it's easy. Luckily Bruce was awkward as he was at these things. The pair stuck close together as they walked down the carpet. Percy thanked the gods he had fast reflexes, otherwise he would have been buried under the weight of everything everyone was throwing towards them. A group of girls were holding a big sign that Percy didn't have a chance to read, but he could see the crudely drawn sword on it. What does it say? Percy whispered to Bruce. That they love you. Bruce frowned slightly, and they want you to take off your top. I knew it was a bad idea to come, Percy grumbled as he glanced at the crowd. It'll be over soon, Bruce patted him on the back. They made it up the steps leading up to the venue. Up there Tony grabbed his arm and dragged him and Bruce towards a photographer. Percy kept his face low as the photo was taken, then nimbly tried to avoid an interviewer, but Tony seemed to think it was funny to knock him towards the interviewer. I'm here with Gladiator in his first public appearance, the woman said as she sidled up next to him, get into the view of the camera. What do you think of it all? The microphone was stuffed under his mouth to catch his words. Gladiator doesn't take questions personally. Sorry, Pepper came up and saved the day. Any questions for him can be asked through me. The women glared briefly at Pepper before putting her stage face back on. Of course, the women smiled. We have some questions from our viewers at home. Sorry, we don't have the time. Pepper placed a hand on Percy's shoulder and steered him away. Thank you, Percy replied as they entered the hall and made their way towards the ballroom. Inside, Percy found the table and sat down. People came up to him and offered their hands, which Percy shook, but when it came to questions he kept his mouth shut. Not that they cared. They rambled and rambled about things Percy honestly didn't care about. Tony came to the table with 2 glasses in hand, and handed one to Percy. Is this alcoholic? Percy questioned as he sniffed it. No, but if you don't drink you'll just look strange. Tony sipped on what Percy guessed was scotch. It's just water. Eventually Percy was the only one left at his table. Everyone else had gone up to dance on the floor. Well, not Bruce and Steve. They were chatting up the mayor or something across the room. The son of Poseidon stood up and ambled over to the bathroom, hoping to find some solitude. Inside was an attendant and Percy tried not to send him a weird look. After relieving himself he washed his hands at the sink and looked at the other man that had come in. He wore a full golden mask that was tinted with green lacework. His hair was black, that much Percy could see, and his wear a mixture of blue and green. He slipped a $100 note to the attendant, whispered something to him, then watched as he left. Enjoying the party, Gladiator? The man asked as he watched Percy awkwardly dry his hands. They surely went a long way to make you feel welcome. Percy remained silent and moved to exit, but found the door was locked. No need to play silent with me, the man smirked. I already know everything there is to know about you, Perseus. Who are you? Percy asked as he stared at the man. Loki Lawfason, pleasure to finally meet you in person, Perseus. He removed his mask to reveal a rather gaunt and pale face. Sparing a glance for the locked door, he felt his heart miss a beat. For some reason he knew he wouldn't be getting that door open anytime soon. Percy, he corrected on instinct, and noticing the raised eyebrow he stumbled to explain, if you're going to threaten me you may as well get my name right. I'm just here to talk. He pulled a pocket watch from his suit and gazed at it momentarily. Warn you actually. That'd be a first, Percy mumbled, lifting his own mask up to scratch at his face. Something he'd been wanting to all night. It was a really annoying itch, Still planning to rule all humans? Loki let out a low chuckle. You amuse me, Percy. The mischievous god looked him up and down. But that is not your concern. It kind of is. Percy inched his hand down to his pocket. It's only your concern if you make it so, Loki stated. I'm giving you the chance to walk away from those petty little Avengers right now and save yourself the trouble. Percy gripped Riptide. And if I say no, I'll reveal your identity to the world and watch as your world crumbles around you, he said as if he was commenting on the weather. I wouldn't bother trying to fight me either. I'm here under a white flag. Why are you warning me? Percy asked, still not letting his pen go. I've heard of your triumphs. You fight for justice and equality, not the best decision in my eyes, but I have heard of the deal you made with your gods. Lady Hecate told me how you turned down godhood to help those who have been shadowed and abandoned. Loki tapped his fingers against the marble bench top. It was the right thing to do, Percy pointed out. Others would have done the same. No, they wouldn't have. It is a rare trait nowadays, selflessness, Loki mused. It's your choice, Perseus. So I can fight you or sit back and watch the world burn? Percy raised an eyebrow. Yes, Loki said in return. I'm not going to let you ruin the world, Percy stated. Then it was good talking to you, Loki said. I'll be seeing you soon. The god of mischief walked past him towards the door, and Percy shifted away on instinct. Do you mind not attacking New York this time? Percy blurted. It costs a lot of money to repair, you know. Global financial crisis and things like that. Loki looked greatly amused by it. His blue-green eyes twinkled with mirth. We shall see. The man slipped his mask back on and walked out of the bathroom. Percy quickly closed the door behind him and grabbed his mask. With mask firmly in place, he exited the bathroom and pushed through the crowd in a hurry to find Steve. The hero was still talking to the mayor, and ignoring the fact he was being extremely rude, Percy yanked Steve away. Loki's here, Percy said in a flurry before Steve could have a go at him. He came and spoke to me in the bathroom. He has a golden mask. Steve was taller than Percy and he scanned over the crowd. I don't see him, Steve said. We better warn. Steve never got to finish as a sudden ear-splitting explosion sent the two of them flying. The bomb, or whatever it was, made the flame it created burn quickly. Smoke filled the room and blocked people's visions, along with making breathing near impossible. Percy pushed himself out of the wreckage of a broken table and tried to look through the smoke. Percy, the demigod, turned to find Steve coughing through the smoke behind him. Put the flame out. Right, Percy muttered to himself as he coughed. Closing his eyes, he tried to find the closest source of water. When he did manage to get a grip of it, he clenched his fists and controlled the water. It came from outside, from the fire hydrants on the street. It poured into the ballroom and fell on them like rain. Coughing violently from the smoke, Percy began making his way blearily towards the exit. Gladiator. He heard Clint yell and he peered through the thinning smoke to spot the brief outline of Clint. A beam collapsed on someone. Percy ran through the debris in the direction Clint was pointing. He saw one person had their arm trapped under a thick beam of wood, while someone was trying to pry it off them. Percy pulled out his sword and cut away the bulk of the beam silently before lifting it off the person. Here, Percy's voice was slightly gruff from his coughing. He bent down and picked up the unconscious man in a bridal carry before addressing the women. Follow me. By the time he got outside, firemen had just began pouring in. The crowds were being held off the streets by SHIELD agents, while ambulances poured in along with fire trucks. He carried the man to an ambulance and was about to walk away when a medic grabbed his arm. Let me give you a check over, he said. Percy waved his hand to signal that he was fine, but unfortunately he couldn't help but cough at that moment. I don't care if you're the big mighty gladiator, sit, the man ordered. Percy flicked a glance at a different ambulance where Tony was getting checked out as well. He was about to refuse again when Pepper came up, looking fine except for the ash that covered her. Don't tell me I'm going to have to order you around like Tony, she looked at him. Frowning at the CEO, he sat down on the edge of the ambulance and took off his jacket like the medic wanted. The man checked him over and wanted to give him an oxygen mask to help get smokeless air into his lungs, but Percy shook his head. I just need water, Percy explained. The medic handed him down a bottle of water, and after sculling the whole bottle his throat felt a lot better. After he was cleared, he took his hoodie off Happy, who was standing next to Tony. Thanks, Percy said honestly as he slipped it on, then removed his mask. The Avengers gathered next to a shield van once they had all been cleared by medics. Clint had a slight limp, Natasha had a cut on her temple, and Bruce seemed to be nursing a hurt wrist. "We've got a code black," Fury stated as he joined them. "Loki's back." Percy rolled onto his stomach on the large bed and groaned. The last tendrils of drool escaped from his open mouth as his brain tried to lure him in consciousness. Rolling over onto his back, he cracked open an eye and stared at the ceiling, blinking the last remains of sleep from his vision. "Hey, Jarvis, what's the time?" Percy asked as he sat up in bed and ruffled up his hair. He gazed at his palm in disgust as it came back sticky and covered in gray and black ash. "It is 10:15, Jarvis responded immediately. Muttering a curse under his breath, Percy stood up and riffled through the pile of clothes he left at the tower. Grabbing what looked the cleanest, he went into the shower and washed the hair gel and ash from his hair. His first sword lesson was at 1 o'clock, thank the gods, but he was supposed to meet Tyson on the beach at 10 o'clock. His Cyclops brother had made him a new shield. He really had to stop losing them, and he was supposed to pick it up today. Hopefully someone would tell Tyson he would be coming later. Grabbing a bag, he stuffed 2 pairs of clothes inside, then grabbed his hoodie. He headed up to the common area to have breakfast. He was surprised to find Bruce and Tony sitting around the breakfast table, talking rapidly. "Morning," Bruce greeted Percy. "Morning." Percy opened the fridge. "Do we have any more of those drinks? You know, the blue ones with the straws?" "Top right," Bruce said without even looking at the fridge. "What if we reroute the power through to the secondary command system, then forward that towards the—" Percy found the drink he was looking for and closed the fridge. Stabbing the straw through the hole, he took a long drink before putting on his hoodie. Picking up the bag and the drink, he stood behind Bruce and attempted to read the papers he was holding. "Any luck on Loki yet?" Percy asked. Loki's threat was still fresh in his mind from last night. He had denied the Mont's offer to leave while he had the chance, and now he was worried the God of Mischief might go through with his threat to reveal Percy's identity to the world. Percy didn't even want to think about what would happen if his identity was revealed. "Nope," Tony replied, "we have something even more important. We're trying to figure out a way to get several city blocks to work from the same control panel for the power." "How is that more important?" Percy couldn't help but ask. "It's not," Bruce cut in. "Mr. Jackson, sir, there is a Mr. Underwood requesting to see you down in the lobby," Jarvis chimed in. "Let him up please," Percy replied. Tony had listed a Percy Jackson under his employment list for his desk lady so that she wouldn't get suspicious of the random people who asked for him, but that didn't mean that Percy could just walk in and out of the building as he chose to. He still had to exit via the garage to make sure no one got suspicious. "Why are you letting people into my tower?" Tony asked, acting appalled. "He's my best friend, not like I could just tell him to leave," Percy shrugged. "And I haven't seen him in a while. He was doing a peaceful protest in Maryland." "Oh God, he's a hippie, isn't he?" Tony sighed dramatically. "Just kill me now." The elevator dinged open and Grover, with crutches to disguise the odd walk his crutches gave him, nearly fell over in his attempt to get out the elevator. Percy saw why instantly. Tyson was also in the elevator behind him, looking rather out of place. However, guessing from the sneeze, his almost allergy to Tyson's fur hadn't lightened at all. "Hey Perk," Grover limped. "Brother," Tyson cheered as he raced past Percy and hugged him tightly. "He's your brother?" Tony asked in amusement. "Hey big guy," Percy wriggled himself out Tyson's grips. "Bruce, Tony, this is my brother Tyson, and my best friend Grover." "Grover, Tyson, meet Bruce Banner and Tony Stark." "You are fantastic, Mr. Stark." Grover stared at Tony. "Your arc reactor energy is going to change the world. I can just feel it." "You're the inventor man," Tyson said with a large smile. "I like your inventions. I invent too." "Yeah, Percy mentioned that." Tony nodded as he continued to look at his papers. "I have your new shield, brother." Tyson dug around in his pockets and pulled out a new watch. "You should be more careful. Tell that to the monsters that keep eating them," Percy mumbled as he pressed the button on the side and looked as it expanded. It was a different design this time. In the center was a gladiator helmet surrounded by all of his adventures with Tyson and Annabeth in the Sea of Monsters. "Wow, thanks Tyson. I thought I was meeting you at camp." "I saw him as he was leaving your apartment." Grover scrunched up his nose. "Smelt him actually." Smells worse in here than it did in the elevator. I'm taking that as a personal insult. Tony set down the papers and quickly wrote down an equation. I'm sorry, Mr. Stark. You see, it's my nose. Grover tapped at it, very sensitive. Grover shifted around awkwardly and ended up getting his crutch caught under a couch. Toppling to the floor, one of his high tops came off, revealing his hoof. Blueberry bush, Grover mumbled as he picked up the shoe and worked his foot into it. He has hooves, Tony commented, mildly surprised. Fawn? Grover let out a goatee bray in disagreement. Satyr. And let me guess, he's half giant? Tony pointed a pen at Tyson. He's a cyclops, Percy corrected with a wan smile. Mist must be getting stronger. I'll see you guys Monday. Fury wants a meeting on Sunday, Bruce called after him. Can't make it, sorry. Percy pressed the elevator button. And don't even think about dragging me from my cabin. Wouldn't dream of it, Tony commented with a small smile. It was Natasha and Clint that did all the dragging. The three of them exited through the garage and flagged down a taxi. Grover opened the window so that he could get some fresh breeze in. Tyson was playing with something in his hands. It looked almost like a small crab. The cab pulled up at the base of the hill and Tyson and Grover got out of the car as quickly as possible. You sure this is where you want to go, kid? The driver asked as he waited for Percy to fish the money out of his wallet. Yeah, Percy gave the driver the money. Why did everyone ask that? What was so odd about teenagers going to a strawberry farm? He ran a little to catch up with Grover, who had already abandoned his crutches and was nearly running up the hill. Slow down, G-man, Percy chuckled. What's the rush? I haven't seen Juniper in forever. Grover stopped by Dahlia's pine. You don't mind? Nah, go ahead. Percy waved him off, watching as he raced down the hill. How long are you staying? He asked Tyson. Just today. Tyson wrapped up his work in an oilcloth. If that's okay with you, brother. It's cool. Percy began heading down. That means I don't have to clean the cabin. It didn't take long for Tyson to be drawn in by the armory. Children of Hephaestus absolutely loved Tyson, and when he visited, they spent most of their time talking and building with him. Percy didn't mind, seeing as he had lessons to do. Seeing as he was alone in his cabin, Chiron had suggested that he attempt to take over sword fighting classes for the cabin who had their instructors gone. So after lunch he headed down to the sword fighting arena, preparing himself for a class with the Hermes cabin. If you two are the cabin leaders, why am I here? Percy asked as he looked at Travis and Connor, the two sons of Hermes. Broken hand. Travis held up his hand, which was wrapped in green plaster. Why don't you just have some ambrosia? Percy asked with a raised eyebrow. See, he broke his hand in science class as he fell, but him falling made my chemicals explode. Connor held up his bandaged hands. The whole science block had to be evacuated. Not like we can just turn up to school all better. How did you manage? Feeling a light movement in his back pocket, he turned and looked at the small son of Hermes. Jimmy. Connor rolled his eyes. What have I told you? You have to be patient. You're teaching them how to pickpocket? Percy raised an eyebrow and pushed his phone down deeper into his pocket. Actually, I don't think I want to know. Good decision, Travis and Connor said at the same time as they walked over to their cabin and attempted to get their attention. Now be good for Mr. Jackson, Connor started. Or he'll set his hellhound on you, Travis finished. Percy rolled his eyes at the twins before telling everyone to get in partners. Stripping off his hoodie, he dug the loose things out of his pocket and wrapped them up inside so they wouldn't get damaged. He set the older teens up to spar while he began showing the younger and new ones some of the basics. Right, I'm going to show you what to do when you have a shorter blade, Percy said. George, want to help? The boy in question stepped out and held his blade at the ready. He showed the move to them, then walked to get the sword that had gone further than expected. Right, now you try it. Percy gestured to the boy who seemed extremely hesitant. I'm not going to bite, come on. The sudden soft sound of his phone going off distracted him though. Just as the kid began to do the move, Percy turned slightly to look in the direction of the noise. The kid's blade went a little too far and caught under Percy's thumb, so when he twisted, the son of Poseidon's hand was wrenched along with the sword. Good job. Percy looked at the hilt of his sword for any nicks but thankfully found none. Sorry about that. Why don't you guys practice among yourself? Turning, he began to head over to see who had called him, but much to his embarrassment he found Connor and Travis had already commandeered the phone. Rushing up the bleacher steps towards the twins, he knew the damage was already done. "You're looking for Percy, right?" Connor was asking into the phone. "Sure, he's safe, for now. If you don't send 200 boxes of Oreos to." "Give me that." Percy made a wild snatch for the phone, but Connor easily passed it to Travis, who continued the conversation. "To Delphi Strawberry Farm, he won't make it to daybreak. And they can't be those disgusting ice cream Oreos either, they have to be double stuffed." "Give me the phone." Percy dropped his sword and wrenched Travis's hand away from his ear before snatching it back. "Ruin all the fun," Travis muttered. Percy glared at the two before putting the phone up to his ear. "Please tell me this is Tony," Percy muttered as he bent to pick up his sword. "You should take better care of your phone." Fury spoke from the other end. "Who was that?" "Some friends." Percy put the phone between his ear and shoulder as he corrected someone's grip on their sword. "Just ignore them." "I plan to." Fury didn't seem impressed. "I need you to come in." Percy minimized his sword and readjusted the phone against his ear. "Why? If New York isn't being burnt to the ground." "We need to brief you on Loki," Fury stated. "He's obviously taken an interest in you, and since you denied him, you'll be his first target." "He's as crazy as a cat lady," Percy said in return. "That's all I need to know, right?" "There's a lot we didn't let the media put out," Fury said. "When can you make it?" Percy gazed at Chiron, who waved him over. Percy sighed into the phone. "Monday." "I mean today, Jackson," Fury said in annoyance. "Can't do today, sorry." Percy frowned apologetically at Chiron, who just gave a knowing smile in return. He was about to say something else when the twins came up behind him and snatched the phone out his hands again. "Guys," Percy groaned, "he's not going to give you Oreos." "Connor, Travis, give Percy back his phone please," Chiron smiled. "One moment." Travis held up a hand. "Yeah, furious person, back to the Oreos." "Now, Travis," Chiron sighed. "Wouldn't want to be stuck with Peleus feeding duty again, would you?" Travis frowned but handed back the phone anyway. "If I hear one more goddamn thing about Oreos, Jackson, I swear," Fury growled through the phone. "Painful death and all that stuff, I know," Percy nodded. "Damn, now I feel like Oreos." "Jackson," Fury growled. "Right, I'll be at the tower at 5, Percy sighed before hanging up. "Sorry, Chiron." "It's all right, Percy." Chiron gave him a small smile. "I was just going to tell you Blackjack's leg is fully healed. The crab that had snipped him had cut through his Pegasus tendons, muscles and flesh right down to the bone. It was very slow-going work to make sure everything healed as it should." "Awesome, I'll fly with him tonight." Percy threw a glance over his shoulder at the Hermes children. "I should get back." "I think Samson is trying to balance a sword on his palm," Chiron frowned. Waving his mentor goodbye, Percy quickly jogged over to Samson and grabbed the sword as it began to topple dangerously to the side. "Right, sorry," Percy said awkwardly. "Whoever gets me double-stuffed Oreos in the next 5 minutes can prank call any Avenger of their choice." Travis cupped his hands and yelled. "And some milk," Connor echoed. Most of the cabin miraculously went to scour the camp for Oreos. Percy stared at the twin brothers in disbelief. "Oreos, really?" Percy questioned as he picked up his jacket and slipped his phone back into his pocket. "We get cravings," they shrugged at the same time. "Okay." Percy shrugged. "Have fun with your Oreos." Going to his cabin, he changed into his board shorts and dumped all of his things onto an empty bunk. Grabbing a towel and his stash of coke, he headed down to the beach. Dumping his things on the beach, he dived into the water. He swam out deep and sat down on the sand. Percy loved sitting on the ocean floor and watching the fish and life go on around him. Occasionally some cheery dolphins would come up to him and start up a conversation, sharing the news from his father's palace. He walked out the water an hour later and sat down on his towel, cracking open a can of coke he spread out on the sand. "Hey Perk," he heard Grover say. "Hey," Percy responded as he held up his empty coke can. "Here." "Thanks." Grover sat down next to him on the towel. "How was Juniper?" Percy asked as he opened another can. "Great, she missed me though," Grover smiled. "I hear the Hermes cabin's having a movie night tonight, you want to come?" Percy frowned. "I can't, Avenger stuff." He played with the sand. "Maybe I can get Bruce to do my homework. Speaking of homework, I should do it. So glad I don't have to go to school anymore." Grover munched on his can happily. though I do miss the enchiladas." "When don't you miss enchiladas?" The pair stood up and Percy rolled up his towel. "And the cafeteria trays," Grover trailed off, staring into space. "Hey, Grover," Percy clicked his fingers in front of his friend's face, "I'll see you tomorrow." "CYA," Grover smiled and gazed at Percy's half-full can. "You going to finish that?" Percy handed over the can and went to his cabin to get change. Chucking on his hoodie and slinging a bag of fresh clothes over his shoulder, he went and said goodbye to Tyson before going to the stables. "Thank the gods, he's going to fly," one of the Pegasus, Buttercup, complained. "He hasn't stopped his whining." "Blackjack," Percy muttered as he opened the door, "honestly? You try being cooped up all day." Blackjack pranced out the stables. "Where to?" "Just to the tower," Percy replied as he hoisted himself up onto his back. "And don't even think about stopping outside the donut shop." "But I really need one," Blackjack whined as he walked out of the stables and began his run-up. Percy had a sudden image of himself landing Blackjack in a parking spot, then walking into a donut shop, hood and all, to buy his horse something. Shaking the image from his mind, he flicked up his hood and gazed at the city below. Blackjack seemed happy to fly again because he dived down low along the water and kept low to the buildings. "You're such an attention seeker," Percy laughed at his friend. "I can't help it if they love me," Blackjack snorted as he landed on the roof of Stark Towers. "You should see the t-shirts," Percy laughed. "I have t-shirts?" Blackjack neighed happily. "What have I started?" Percy shook his head in a joking manner. "I'll need a lift back." "Just call." Blackjack began stretching out his wings to fly again. Stepping into the elevator, he took off his hood and pressed the button for his room. After replacing all his dirty clothes with new ones, he grabbed a new jacket and left the building. It didn't take him long to walk home. His mother and Paul were at home cooking together in the kitchen. "Hey Mom," Percy said after dumping his bag in the laundry. "Hey Paul." "Hi Percy," Paul smiled. "Are you staying for dinner?" "No, sorry." Percy opened the cupboard. "Do we have any Oreos?" "Doesn't matter, found them." Percy stuffed the Oreos into his backpack containing his homework. "A package came for you," Sally said as she stirred a pot. "It's in the lounge room." Heading into the lounge room, he found a rather basic delivery box, about 15 by 15, sitting on the table. Peeling away the tape that surrounded it, he looked at the delivery slip. Shrugging, he opened it and picked up the piece of plain white paper that rested on top of the white peanut foam. "You've made your choice, now watch your world crumble." Percy froze. Hesitantly, he called out to his mother. "Who delivered this?" The worry must have slipped into his voice because his mother came into the lounge room. "The mailman." Sally looked at the white peanut foam. "I thought maybe you'd ordered some jewelry for Annabeth," guessing from the size. "I didn't order anything." Percy hesitantly began to part the foam. His hand hit something hard and he pulled it out. It was an ornate little jewelry box. "Are you sure?" Sally asked. Percy hesitantly opened the box and stared at what rested on the black velvet within. A silver bracelet glinted in the light, while the scythe attached to the bottom stared up at Percy like Kronos himself. An image of Selena Beauregard lying dead in Clarissa's armor flashed in front of him. "I have to go." Percy shut the box and put it back in the packing foam. "Percy, what's wrong?" Sally asked, concerned. "I don't know." Percy picked up his abandoned backpack. "It's probably nothing. I'll be back Sunday night." "Okay Percy, just be careful." Sally gave him a small knowing smile. "I'll try." Percy hugged her lightly before heading out. He knew it had to be Loki. Who else would be able to find out about it, let alone find the necklace? What did it mean? Was he going to stir Kronos? Was there another spy at the camp? Hailing down a taxi, he gave the address for a burger joint just around the corner from the tower. Paying the driver, he got out and walked around the side for the garage entrance for the tower. Swiping the card Tony had given him in front of the sensor, he entered and rode the elevator up to the communal area. "You're early," Steve commented from where he sat drawing. "Where are the others?" Percy asked. "Bruce and Tony are in the lab. I think Clint and Natasha are in the gym. I think." Steve closed his sketchbook. "Why?" "This got sent to my house." Percy set it on the table and handed the card to Steve, before lifted out the jewelry box. "Loki sent you a bracelet?" Steve looked at the box on the table. Picking it up, he nearly dropped it as it suddenly changed into an old-timey pocket watch, open to reveal a picture of a rather beautiful woman. Steve seemed to remain silent for a moment before standing. "Jarvis." Call in everyone, Fury as well, he'll want to take a look at this. I don't even know what this is. Percy took the box from Steve and watched as it returned back to the scythe. He's threatening us with jewelry? I don't know. Steve gazed at the box and looked up as Clint and Natasha strode into the room, looking sweaty from their workouts. You called us up here for a bracelet? Clint looked at the box in Percy's hand. The son of Poseidon offered it up to him and Clint took it, surprised to see the bracelet transform into a ticket for the carnival. He had a far-off look in his eyes momentarily before he passed the box to Natasha. Before anyone could see what was in it, she snapped it shut. He's threatening us. Natasha set the box down on the table, the elevator dinged and Bruce and Tony stepped out. Tony had a large amount of oil smudged on his arms, shirt and a slight bit on his face, while Bruce was perfectly clean as usual. He's finding out weaknesses. Who? Bruce asked as he folded his arm over his chest. Loki. Percy handed the box up and watched as Bruce opened it, a look of longing crossing over his face momentarily. Handing it over to Tony, everyone watched as he pulled out a vial filled with little shards of metal. Holding it up at eye level, he rotated it around and watched as the metal moved around. Setting it back in the box, he handed it to Percy. They were silent for a moment before Bruce dared to speak. He's telling us he knows us. Bruce looked at the box. That knows exactly how to mess with our heads. Well, he's succeeding, Tony muttered as he sat down and inspected the package box. He's had months to plan this. He's not going to mess around this time. What's the problem this time? Fury asked as he strutted out of the elevator. How did you get here so fast? Percy couldn't help but ask. I was already on my way, Fury said in answer. What is it, Captain? We think Loki sent this to Percy. Steve nodded towards the box. Everyone parted for Fury as he picked up the box, watching to see if it would change into anything. Seeing that it remained the same silver bracelet, he raised a singular eyebrow. It changes with whatever one of us touches it. Steve politely took the box off the director and showed him as it changed into the pocket watch again. I don't like this one bit, Fury stated, setting the box down. I'll send it to the lab to be looked at. I want to know what they all become. This obviously has some symbolism behind it. Loki isn't very good at giving gifts. He gave me shrapnel. Who gives a guy shrapnel? Tony snorted as he stood and headed towards the bar. Banner? Fury asked. A necklace. Bruce crossed his arms over his chest. It belonged to Betty Ross. I've got a circus ticket, Clint said, gaze cold. Ooh, circus ticket, scary, Tony said dramatically. Anybody have any food? Percy dug through his backpack and chucked the Oreos to Tony. Fury looked at them like they were the devil's work. Scotch and Oreos, let's try it, Tony smirked. He gave me a match. Natasha glared at the box. And you? Fury raised an eyebrow. What does the bracelet mean? It belonged to someone who used to spy on Camp Half-Blood. Percy picked it up out of the box. It's Kronos' symbol. This is what I'm here to warn you about. Fury watched as Percy set the necklace down and took an Oreo from the packet. He will try and mess with your head. It's how he works. He's done it before. He'll do it again. Do not underestimate him. Don't listen to a word he says. Percy dusted off his hands and fished through the box for the note. Handing it to Fury, he swallowed his mouthful of cookie before speaking. He's talking directly to me, Percy explained. That's why he sent it to me, not any of you guys. Why you? You haven't done anything to him. Natasha sat down. Maybe he doesn't like Greeks. Percy shrugged and moved in for another cookie. Where's Thor when you need him? Sending him to give Loki the "you're better than this" speech isn't going to work this time. Tony finished off his glass. Didn't work last time either, did it? Let's just track him down and have Hulk beat the crap out of him like last time. I can agree with that. Clint nodded in cold agreement. How are we going to find him? Percy questioned. I'll have the labs see if they can pick up any clues from the package. Fury put the jewelry box back into the delivery box. I'll contact you if we find anything. Just as Fury had left, Steve's phone began to ring. Percy flickered a glance over to the screen and he read the number. I wouldn't answer that, he commented. It's probably Travis. Who? Steve asked, hanging up. He stole my phone and tried to ransom me off for Oreos. Percy shrugged as he took up one of the cookies. Is that a normal occurrence? Steve asked with a raised eyebrow. They do play a lot of food-related pranks now that I think about it. Percy dug around in his backpack, looking for his homework. Who knows anything about Maleska? Where did that come from? Clint asked. I have a report due. I figured if I have two genius at my disposal, may as well use them, Percy smiled. You just found out a deity might destroy the world and you're worried about homework? Clint asked, eyebrow raised. That'd be fun, explaining that to my biology teacher. Sorry sir, I couldn't do my homework because I'm actually part of the Avengers and a crazy man might be attempting to take over the world. Percy rolled his eyes. Better than saying the dog ate it, Tony shrugged. His pen tapped furiously against the table while his foot rocked against the floor. A bird flying outside the window held his interest for a moment before he flickered his gaze towards the whiteboard. His marine biology teacher, Mr. Humphreys, was going over the night's homework on the board, but as expected that didn't hold his attention for long. Letting his gaze roam around the room, he jumped slightly as a song broke through the brief silence in the room. Looking down at his pocket, he blushed a deep scarlet as he realized it was his phone. His teacher raised an eyebrow at him while the class giggled and chuckled among themselves at the sound. Turn that phone off before I take it from you, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Humphreys frowned. Sorry sir, Percy muttered as he looked at the caller ID. Turning the phone onto silent, he put it back into his pocket and hurried to scribble down the homework before the final bell went. Packing away his things, he left as the bell went. Pulling out his phone, he checked through to see if Tony had left a voice message, but found his inbox empty. Shrugging, he hefted his bag higher onto his shoulder and headed out onto the school grounds. Percy, the son of Poseidon, turned at the sound of his name to see Nico leaning against a tree. Hey Nico. Percy walked up to his cousin. I thought you were staying with your dad for a while? Nico shrugged carelessly. Demeter decided to drop in to see if there was any way she could lighten up the place for Persephone. The son of Hades shuddered. I did not want to be a part of that. Percy chuckled lightly as he began walking out the school gates. I have swim practice, unless you want to watch me do laps. Maybe I'll go find Talia, Nico commented. Isn't she in Canada? Percy personally didn't keep in touch with his elder cousin when she was doing her hunter's duty. All the information on her whereabouts he got from Annabeth. Easy way to tell, Nico shrugged as he neared someone wearing a t-shirt decorated with silver arrows, the modern symbol of Talia. It was really sad how fast the t-shirt and merchandise franchises started up, and seeing as they weren't trademarked names, anything went. Excuse me, is it true that the Huntress is in New York? He asked the girl. She looked him up and down, spotted the skull ring, a rather hot item at the moment, and answered with a pleased smile. Yeah, she's down in the Bronx or something. There's your answer, Nico said in return as they continued to walk towards the pool arena. That would have been awkward if she didn't know, Percy laughed as he crossed the street. For you maybe, Nico shrugged as he flipped the bird at a taxi driver who honked at him for taking too long to cross the street. I wouldn't have cared less. I've noticed, Percy smiled over his shoulder at his cousin. I saw you on the news. Nico pushed through the afternoon crowds to keep in stride with his cousin. That hair didn't suit you. Percy rolled his eyes. You're a fashion expert now? You looked like an Italian gangster gone wrong, Nico commented. Apparently I looked very handsome, Percy trailed off. Did Pepper tell you that? Nico laughed. So what if she did? Percy retorted as he stopped outside the swimming arena. Doesn't matter. Nico folded his arms over his chest. Are you coming to camp this weekend? Yeah, if Fury doesn't drag me away again. Percy looked at his watch. I have to go. Want to grab a pizza? Meet me on the tower roof at around 7:30? Sure. Nico offered a small wave. The swim practice was long and grueling. States was coming up and Percy had been appointed to nearly every single event the team had agreed to take part in. He lost counts of how many times he swam up and down the same pool, but he knew it was too many. When practice did eventually finish at 6:30, all Percy could think about was oily pizza. Unfortunately, it seemed Tony had other ideas. When he finally got around to checking his phone, he found he had 12 missed phone calls and several new text messages. Scrolling through the text messages, he found they all said the same thing: get to the lab ASAP. Gazing up at the skyline, he noticed nothing was burning, and when he walked past a TV store, he saw there was no news of a horrible catastrophe on the news. 20 minutes later, he found himself standing in the doorway of Tony's lab. He had never been on this level before because it was apparently a strictly genius-only area. The walls were lined with all the previous Iron Man suits, along with various cabinets covered in highly flammable stickers. His cars were spread out at the back of the room, while closer to the elevator were his desks and actual workspaces. Bruce sat working on something, while Tony was looking at something on a computer screen. Dumping his bag on a desk, Percy walked up behind the billionaire. "What's the emergency?" Percy asked the billionaire. "I've been asking that question for 3 hours and he still hasn't answered me," Bruce commented from his work table. "Patience, Jolly Green." Tony spun around in his chair. "It seems S.H.I.E.L.D's been busy." "They're always busy." Bruce turned to face his friends. "The files took me 2 hours to unencrypt." Tony brought up numerous holographic files. Percy crossed his arms over his chest. "You hacked S.H.I.E.L.D's files?" "It was sitting there. I took it as a challenge." Tony shrugged. "Has S.H.I.E.L.D. ever talked to the director of your camp?" Percy scratched his chin as he answered. "Not that I know of." "That's what I thought." Tony smirked. "They've been secretive again." Bruce stood up and walked over to the two of them. "They're a previously top-secret government branch. Of course they've been secretive." "Are you going to show me or are you going to keep rambling?" Percy asked. "Right. Okay." Tony cut him off. "Here we go. Jarvis, bring up all the recently downloaded files." "Does that include the latest online Playboy?" Jarvis said with a hint of sarcasm. "I don't want to scar the boy. He's probably never seen boobs in his life." Percy scowled at Tony. "The S.H.I.E.L.D. files." 5 different things popped up onto the screen. They looked like normal document files labeled with levels 1 through to 5, then a single file labeled Omega. "These are the files of Project Omega," Tony said as he opened the file level 5 with a flick of a hand. "Look familiar?" It looked like a biography of some sort. Percy's dyslexia got the better of him with the tiny script and small spaces, but it was easy to see who it was about. His own school photo stared back at him, smiling weakly. "Did they have to use the school photo?" Percy scowled. "I look like I just farted, geez." Tony raised an eyebrow. "That's all you got out of it? For a genius you forget the tiniest things." "I'm dyslexic." Percy rolled his eyes. "I'm guessing it's a S.H.I.E.L.D. file on me? Age, schools, grades, family history, permanent record, likes, dislike, personality review." Bruce trailed off. "It's like everyone else's S.H.I.E.L.D. files." "Personality review?" Percy asked. "Interest peaking? What does it say?" "Dumb, ignorant, rash." Tony began to list. "Rash, resourceful, self-sacrificing, quick to anger," Bruce said shortly, cutting off Tony's playful lies. "Is there a point to all of this, Tony?" "Fine." Tony opened the level 5 file wider, showing pictures of Talia and Nico. "These are people they considered to be the most powerful demigods." "Nico's going to get a kick out of that," Percy smiled. "All these files contain reported demigods. Level 1 being the least powerful, level 5 most powerful." Tony opened up all the files, letting the holographic reports float around them. Every single person in the files Percy recognized, whole life story and everything. Like this one on someone called Pollux Beauvale, level 2. Percy looked at the photo of the child of Dionysus, brow crinkling in confusion. Apparently suspected child of Dionysus, brother deceased as of August 18, 2010, Tony read, B average student, currently studying at a community college. Percy watched as photos of Pollux exiting a car at the base of camp came up. How did they get this? Did they have camp scoped out? "And here's another for Butch Trent." Tony brought up a new file. "I found this one interesting. Shaved head, face like a pile of bricks, and yet he has a rainbow tattoo." "Don't mention that to him," Percy muttered. "He's rather touchy about it. Why would S.H.I.E.L.D. want files on him?" "They have files on everyone," Tony commented. "These were added after you joined our little boy band. They obviously found it in their best interest to catalog everything to do with your camp." "What's in the Omega file?" Bruce asked as he pointed towards the remaining file. "Seems they've been keeping an eye on your family as well." Tony spread open the last file to reveal photos of different gods. Percy checked them off in his mind. Apollo, Hermes, Triton, Artemis, Zeus, Hera and Poseidon. "The gods I can understand," Percy said as he continued to look at the level files, "not the demigods." "That kid there looks like he couldn't even hurt a fly." Tony pointed to Harvey, the son of Ares. "Harvey has a mean swing." Percy couldn't help but say. "Those photos are taken at the base of Half-Blood Hill." Percy stared at the photos of various campers getting out of different vehicles. Demigods don't pose a threat to mortals. Why do they care who demigods are? Who knows? Tony shrugged, suddenly smiling like a child on Christmas. This is one thing I can't make of. S.H.I.E.L.D. seems to have found interest in strawberries. The billionaire tapped at his phone and swiped away the files. Video feeds took their place and Percy's eyes widened as he saw where it was. All 20 of the feeds showed different points at camp. The forge, dining hall, forest, entrance, cabins. They even had a camera outside the bathrooms. Why would S.H.I.E.L.D. want to spy on strawberry fields? Bruce asked as he twisted his wireframe glasses in his grip. That's the mist. Percy stared at the feed of the dining pavilion and watched as campers filed out. It's actually camp. That's unfair. I want to see this camp of yours, Tony complained like a child. Percy paused for a moment. Let's see if this works. He clicked his fingers like he had seen Talia do in the past. Bruce put his glasses back on and stared at the cameras in wonder. Tony cocked his head to the side and got a far-off look in his eyes. Percy felt the anger bubble up within him. They shouldn't be spying on camp. It wasn't a place for mortals. Crossing his arms over his chest, he stared at the different feeds. Ooh, look, they have old feeds. Tony tapped through his phone again. You wear their Sunday, right? Tony. Percy tried to deter the man from digging into camp life more than he had to. Let's see. Tony opened a file. Are you balancing a sword on your nose? A video of Percy in the amphitheater came up on a larger screen. It showed him with Grover, Travis, Connor and Clarice. The other 4 were sitting up in the stands while he was attempting to balance his sword on his nose. It had been a bet, the only way to get Hermes and Ares on his team for Capture the Flag. They shouldn't have these. Percy glared at the screens. How did they even get them in? Demigods are everywhere, someone said from above them, and the trio looked up to watch Clint climb out of the air vents, Natasha following behind him. You got a demigod to do this? Percy waved his hand at the screen. No demigod would do this. Not Greek, Natasha argued in return. You let a Roman into camp? Percy asked, surprised and shocked before his train of thought suddenly changed. Camp isn't a place for mortals to see. It's things like that that makes us wonder what you don't want us to see, Clint replied. I don't think they'd want to see this, Tony chimed in. It's disturbing on so many levels. Percy looked at the video of him and Annabeth kissing on the sand. Blushing deeply, he averted his eyes and attempted to snatch Tony's phone out his hand. It was from the school holidays before Annabeth went back home. Are you kissing or eating each other's faces? Tony easily blocked the teenager's attempts to get the phone. It's hard to tell the difference. I want those cameras gone, Percy said as he gave up on getting the phone. Natasha raised an eyebrow. We're not getting rid of them. I'll smash them then, Percy retorted. Camp Half-Blood is not for mortals. That's why we have borders. Well, once a pizza man broke through them, but at least that was by accident. We're just observing. Clint didn't seem at all deterred by Percy's annoyance. That's why you have files on all the demigods, Percy raised an eyebrow. For observation? It's like having files on every foreigner person just because they're not American. Unlike demigods, most foreigners' people don't pose a threat to the nation. Natasha looked Percy straight in the eye. Oh yes, we're planning an attack on America, Percy said sarcastically. If you haven't noticed, we live in America. We grew up in America. You can never be too careful, Clint retorted. You don't get it, we're not going to hurt people. Percy threw his arms up in annoyance, not on purpose anyway. That's comforting. Tony chimed in. If Lord Zeus found out, he'd blow a fuse. Percy gazed up at the sky. And Mr. D would turn you all in dolphins, maybe birds, it depends on his mood. I'm going to be up on the roof calling Chiron, telling him to get rid of the cameras. We'll just put more in. Natasha didn't seem at all fazed. Waste of money. Percy yelled as he stepped into the elevator. Pressing the button for the roof, he ran a hand through his face. It annoyed him that they put cameras in a place he considered to be a safe haven. The files they had on everyone was unnerving. It made him feel like they were waiting for demigods to start an all-out war against them. Then there was the fact they had sent a Roman to put in the cameras. At camp, Romans were generally accepted, but to Romans, Greeks were as bad as Hades' underpants. Hey, Steve was up on the roof with a sketchbook perched in his lap. Hi, Percy muttered as he fished out his phone and stared out across the city. With no news helicopters around and it being so dark, no one would be able to see him. Steve had a little book light clipped onto his sketchbook and Percy couldn't help but smile softly at the funny sight. "What's wrong?" Steve asked as he picked gently sketched on the page. "How did you know something was wrong?" Percy asked as he sat down. "You usually talk more, if you don't mind me saying." Steve was always one to be polite. "Shield has cameras at Camp Half-Blood. They shouldn't," Percy said shortly as he looked at his watch. "Beware of Greeks bearing pizza," a voice spoke from the shadows. Nico stepped out of the dark with 2 boxes of pizza held up on his hand. Percy smiled at the reference and took the boxes off his cousin before saying, "I just have to make a call." "I preferred you when you didn't have a phone." Nico sat down near Steve and spread out the 2 boxes. "I think I'm starting to prefer you when you were emo," Percy retorted as he pulled out his phone. As Percy walked to the side of the roof to make the call, Nico opened the pizza boxes and pulled out an oily slice. "Want some?" Nico asked, remembering his manners. "No thank you," Steve replied politely. "Your loss." Nico shrugged. "More for me I suppose. What are you drawing?" Steve had actually never had a proper conversation with the son of Hades. The dark-haired teen dropped in and out of the tower mostly with Percy. Usually dressed in dark clothes and wearing a dark expression, he didn't seem like Steve's type of person, but of course he knew better than to judge by appearance. "New York." Steve turned it around to show Nico. Nico inspected it for a moment. "That doesn't look like New York. You're missing the Trump Tower and everything." Steve blushed slightly as he answered, "It's old New York." "Right, because you're from the 40s. Nico moved back. "I still have your trading cards. They're vintage now. My plan is to sell them when I need money." "Did you collect them?" Steve asked. "Agent Coulson used to have a whole set. He said they were hard to obtain." "No, brought it straight from the shops, I think." "Yeah, I did." Nico sounded unsure. Steve's brow crinkled for a moment. "That would make nearly 80. "I think I'm actually around 78. Nico trailed off as he picked up another piece of pizza. He seemed angry at himself for a moment. "I've never been good at maths." Steve briefly remembered Percy mentioning something about having a friend that was like him. Steve never would have guessed it was Nico. Was it part of being the son of a death god? "You became ageless?" "How, if it's not too rude to ask?" Steve inquired politely. "Magic Hotel." Nico shrugged like they were a normal occurrence. "Thought I was in there for a month, it turned out to be 70 years. "It must be hard." Steve trailed off as he felt an odd feeling rise up in his chest at the thought of not being the only one with this kind of trouble in the world. "I can't remember it." Nico gazed down at the ground. "My memory was wiped." "Must suck to be you. You actually can remember everything." "It is sometimes." Steve gave a sad smile. "Despite its flaws, this age is pretty cool." Nico finished another slice of pizza. "I suppose," Steve agreed. "You're talkative," Percy commented as he came back over. "I blame the mega slushy," Nico shrugged, "and the 3 happy meals I ate before coming." "How are you still hungry?" Percy asked as he sat and took up a slice of pizza. Nico shrugged in answer. The 3 of them sat up on the roof eating the pizza. Steve couldn't help but cave. And chatting about all the oddities in this world. Even though Nico was nearly the epitome of a normal teenager, Steve couldn't help but feel a little less alone in the world. Sleep picked at the edges of his mind. It attempted to wriggle its way into his hyperactive mind. After having pizza with Nico and Steve until 10 o'clock, he had been called to camp by Chiron because apparently a group of hippocampi had gotten stuck again. Percy knew it had to be bad if Chiron had called. He brushed away the tantalizing tendrils of sleep, but not by choice. If it was up to him, he would lay down on the tiles and sleep until last period. But no, it was time for 2 periods of swimming. "Come on, do your warm-ups," Coach Tinner said with a clap of his hands. "We have the Tri-States in 2 months and I want to win us another trophy." Percy pushed himself off the bleachers and padded across the tiles towards the edge of the pool. Another senior class was using half of the lanes for their own physical education class, so the swim team had to double up. "Hurry up, Jackson, I'd actually like to get into the water," Daryl sneered from behind him. Diving into the water, he felt the cooling liquid brush the sleep from his mind as best it could. It wasn't fresh water though, so what it could do was minimal. The warm-up 3 laps were easy for Percy despite his tired state. "Percy, can you get the float boards, and Daryl, can you get the timers for me?" Coach Tinner asked when they had finished. Nodding a yes, Percy pulled himself out of the water. Daryl followed suit and began strutting down the tiles towards the supply cupboard, which just happened to be right next to where the other class was working. It was customary for people on the team to wear Speedos. Many opted not to, but Daryl didn't. He walked down those tiles proudly like he didn't have a care in the world. I hear Coach Tinner will be deciding the new swim captain soon. Daryl pretended to make light, spiteful conversation. What about it? Percy asked. I hear he's going to elect me, Daryl said proudly as he winked at a group of swimming girls. Would you like a round of applause? Percy crossed his arms over his chest. Honestly, Daryl, tell someone who cares. What happened next? Daryl would claim to be an accident. He casually stuck out his foot while he was walking, trying to trip Percy. The son of Poseidon easily stepped over it but unfortunately slipped on a puddle of water. He landed hard on the tiled floor, his head making a painful cracking sound that echoed around the room. So much for demigod reflexes, he muttered mentally. He blushed slightly at the sound of the laughter from the pool. Percy wasn't popular, but he wasn't a nerd either. He was important enough for people to say hi in the hall and talk about cute he was, but certainly not as much as the purely popular jocks. Clumsy much? Daryl asked with a smirk. Standing up, Percy rubbed the back of his head to make it look like he was hurt. Glaring at Daryl, he walked past him and opened the storage room. After 2 hellish hours of swimming, Percy never would have thought he'd call swimming hellish. He started heading towards the locker room to change. Percy, can I have a word? Coach Tinner's voice stopped him. Turning around, he followed his coach and sat on the bleachers with him. Continuing to dry his hair with his towel, he stared at his coach in question. You're a great swimmer, Percy, his coach began. You've beaten all the good records, you win in all your events, and all your teachers say you've really picked up your game in your classes. Your behavior has also improved tenfold. Percy pulled the towel from his head and locked eyes with his coach, wondering if he was saying what he thought he was saying. I want you to be the captain. Coach Tinner actually said the words. Percy was shocked into silence for a moment. Being captain of the swim team didn't mean bossing everybody around or being in charge. It meant getting the awards, taking the photos for newspapers, shaking hands with important people. Thank you, this is great. I never thought. Wow, better me than Daryl, I suppose. Oh man, he is going to hate this. He realized he was rambling. Thanks, Coach Tinner, you don't know how much this means to me. His coach patted him lightly on the back before standing. No problem, Percy. No, go get change. Lunch will be starting soon. Heading back into the change room with a spring in his step, Percy changed quickly into his usual pair of jeans and a black shirt. Ruffling out his hair, he slung his bag onto his back and walked out into the hall, hoping to reach his locker before the lunchtime swarm began. Changing out his biology book for his math book, he had just shut the door when a voice bellowed from down the hall. Jackson. Turning, he saw Daryl standing at the end of the hall, his 2 cronies standing behind him. Ron just heard that Coach Tinner made you captain. Daryl strode down the hall. What about it? Percy asked sarcastically, wondering mentally how he hadn't noticed the other teenager listening in. I'm supposed to be captain. Daryl loomed near Percy threateningly. If you're supposed to be captain, why did coach pick me? Percy couldn't help but ask. He must have made a mistake. Why would he pick an ADD idiot freak like you? Daryl sneered while his friends chuckled. I have ADHD, not ADD. Percy couldn't help but correct him. If you're going to insult me, you may as well get your facts right. What's the difference? You're still retarded, Daryl replied. Controlling his anger, he attempted to step past Daryl, but his 2 cronies moved in to stop his escape. Scowling, Percy tried to push through them, but they refused to move. The bell went and the hall began to fill with people. Tell your cronies to move, Daryl, before I make you. Percy pronounced each word carefully. Is that a threat, Jackson? Daryl sneered at him. Even in the loud hall, those words had an immediate effect. Everyone surrounding them in the halls paused and looked at them. They took in Percy's angry and defensive posture and watched with eager eyes. Fight, fight, fight. Someone began to chant. The chant became louder and Percy knew a teacher would come soon. Let's give the people what they want, shall we? Daryl cracked his knuckles threateningly and went to give Percy a solid right hook to the jaw. Acting on instinct, the son of Poseidon ducked down and threw off his bag. His hand reached for his pocket but then paused. What would he achieve by pulling out Riptide? He dodged a messy blow from Richard and returned with his own solid kick to his diaphragm. Fight! Fight! The crowd cheered on, forming a large but tight circle around them. Smash his face in, Jackson, someone yelled. Kick him in the balls, Daryl, someone else cheered. I don't want to fight, Percy said to Daryl. Too late now, Perseus, Daryl sneered. Percy was so shocked by Daryl's use of his full name that the man managed to land a solid right hook to his jaw. Spinning from the impact, Percy rubbed his jaw before glaring at Daryl. A couple of people in the crowd giggled at his full name and he clenched his fist again. Anger, tiredness and embarrassment flushed through Percy and he felt a sudden need to pay Daryl back for all the below-the-belt insults. What did I ever do to you, Daryl? Percy muttered before blocking a blow from Ron. He punched him hard in the face. Percy felt the teen's jaw shift under his hand, obviously dislocated. The crowd let out a loud groan as if they could feel his pain. You walk around like your shit doesn't smell, Jackson. Daryl cracked his neck and tried to act brave. I'm not the one strutting around the pool in a Speedo every day, Percy returned while the crowd cheered. Daryl threw a punch towards his stomach and Percy grabbed his wrist mid-blow and twisted. In one smooth move he had kicked the legs out from underneath Daryl, sending him to the floor, then had the snotty teenager's arm twisted behind his back. What is going on here? A new voice shouted over the others. Paul broke through the crowd, dressed in his usual jeans and leather jacket. Percy had to admit it probably wasn't the best position to find your stepson in. Two teenagers on the floor groaning and nursing different wounds while a third was pinned to the floor by said stepson. Percy, go wait outside the principal's office. The rest of you go to lunch. It was rare to hear Mr. Blofeld actually talk like a strict teacher, but it seemed that it was what was needed to move the kids along. They scattered like cats. Percy glared at the floor, grip unconsciously tightening around Daryl's wrist. Go and wait outside the principal's office, Percy, Paul said as he pinched the bridge of his nose. What happened? You were doing so well. Percy climbed off Daryl and picked up his bag. He threw the first punch. You shouldn't have punched back, Paul said in return. I got swim captain. He got jealous and decided to come looking for trouble. Percy began walking down the hall, and now I'm going to get all the blame. Those who hit back are just as responsible. Paul softened for a moment. Just go and wait outside the office. People were milling around in the other halls. They parted for Percy and whispered behind their hands. The son of Poseidon knew he shouldn't have acted so rashly, but he had never liked bullies of any type. People couldn't just walk around like top dogs and think they could get away with it. He reached the office and sat down in a seat outside. In the end he landed himself 2 weeks suspension. Apparently being called names and ridiculed wasn't enough reason to dislocate someone's jaw, possibly crack some ribs and thoroughly humiliate someone. You were doing so well, the principal gazed at him. Everyone seems to be saying that, Percy huffed as he folded his arms over his chest. This won't affect anything, will it? It's up to Coach Tinner if he still wants you as captain. Mr. Blofeld will bring home any homework for you so your lessons won't be affected. Just count yourself lucky you don't have any tournaments in the next 2 weeks. His principal laced his fingers together. Take this time to reflect on what you have done, Mr. Jackson. I don't want to see another incident like this. Yes, sir, Percy nodded solemnly. The suspension is effective immediately. Mr. Blofeld has already said it is fine for you to return home, the principal explained. Percy nodded and stood up. Walking out of the office, he put his bag back on his shoulder and began walking through the halls. The new period had already begun, so the halls were a ghost town. Once outside he frowned. His mum was home. He didn't want to go back and see that kind and knowing smile on her face. She'd always tell him it wasn't his fault when he got suspended or kicked out of a school, and yet her eyes always showed a hint of sadness. She had been so proud of him actually managing to stay at a school for more than 1 year without even a suspensions, but now it seemed that streak was up. Pulling out his hoodie from his bag, he chucked it on and began walking the near-empty streets. He wondered where he would to kill the time before pulling out his phone and opening his contacts. Entering the number, he pressed the ear to his phone. Hey, Steve, want to have lunch? Percy asked as he walked down the streets. Aren't you supposed to be in school? Steve questioned. Got suspended, Percy said simply as he attempted to flag down a taxi. Okay then. How about Ricardo's downtown, on 24th? Steve questioned. His voice oozed with need for more knowledge. I prefer to eat without having the paparazzi taking my picture, Percy said sourly as he gazed up at the sky. Thick droplets began to drop down on him and he scowled. Ricardo's is always busy. I'll wear a cap. I just want to get out of the tower. Tony's trying to steal my blood, Steve joked before talking to someone else on the other end. Mind if Bruce joins? More the merrier, I suppose. The rain began to bucket down and Percy had no choice but to let it fall down on him. A car drove past and water splashed up off the street and soaked his jeans. And I could really go for some merry now. Be there in 10, Steve said before hanging up. When Percy finally got a taxi hailed down, he gave the address and sunk into the tobacco-smelling seats. Texting through, sorry about what happened at school. I just need to calm down a bit. I'll be home by 5, to his mother. When he reached the restaurant, he forked over the money for the taxi before entering. Steve was right. This place was already busy despite the fact it was only 1 o'clock. Getting a table for 3, he tapped his fingers on the table as he looked at the menu. So, suspended from school? Bruce asked as he pulled up a seat. Bruce didn't really have to hide his face from others. Not many people even realized the Hulk turned into a man. Apparently to the insane computer geeks, the Hulk was being kept in Area 61. Steve on the other had a baseball cap on and a hoodie. It was a strange sight to see Captain America dressed as such. Not the worst that's happened, Percy muttered as he twiddled with a toothpick. Tony mentioned something about you being expelled from 14 schools. Bruce gave a playful smile. 14? Steve asked wide-eyed. How is that even possible? It's a gift, Percy shrugged. Who started the fight? Steve questioned. Daryl. This? Percy decided to change language as he spotted the look Steve was sending him. This idiot on my swim team. All he does is annoy me, and out of nowhere he decided to fight me. And you hit back? Bruce raised an eyebrow. You must have done a lot of damage to get suspended. I may have broken and dislocated a couple of some people's bones. Percy shrugged and flagged down a waiter to order a Coke. You need to learn how to control that anger. Have you tried meditation? Bruce began to suggest. ADHD kid meditating. I thought you were supposed to be a genius? He joked. I just need some Coke, some sleep, and something greasy, preferably smothered in cheese. You've come to the right place. The waitress sidled into the conversation. Can I get you boys anything? After ordering food, Percy sipped on his newly arrived Coke. 2-week suspension. It looks like I'm going to be spending a lot more time at the tower, Percy muttered. Well, Tony is currently on a scientific rampage. Bruce sipped on his tea. He's nearing a breakthrough apparently. In what? Steve asked. I have no idea. He's been surviving off coffee for the past 12 hours and shows no signs of slowing down. Bruce stirred a spoon around in his cup. Steve's phone suddenly began vibrating across the table. He gazed at the caller ID for a moment before excusing himself from the table. Percy shrugged and quickly became distracted by his plate of oily and cheesy nachos. You don't think it's related to what happened last night, do you? Percy asked Bruce. Tony's scientific breakthrough, I mean. I have no idea. Bruce gave a small smile. It involves a lot of theorem though. And he's not sharing it with you? Percy twirled a bit of cheese around in the air. Apparently not, Bruce shrugged. How did the camera hunt at camp go? Apparently Chiron had set up a camera hunt across the whole camp. Whoever found a camera would be given a week off from any duty they chose. Good, I think, Percy shrugged. Everyone was pretty pissed from what Nico told me. Wouldn't be surprised. Steve rocked up at the end of the table looking rather sad. I have to go. Steve inclined his head politely. I'm sorry. What is it, Steve? Bruce asked, instantly worried for his friend. That was the nursing home. Steve gazed down at his hands. Apparently Peggy passed away in her sleep. The funeral for Peggy Carter was in England. Percy knew as a friend he should be there comforting Steve, but it would cause more trouble than good. He would just be that awkward one in the corner who didn't know how to act or what to say. Bruce, Tony and Natasha had gone with Steve to England. Tony because Peggy Carter was apparently a family friend. Bruce because he was good with helping people when they were low, and Natasha because apparently a woman's touch might be needed. Clint had stayed behind because he had been given on-call duty. Even though it was only 3 days after being suspended, Percy was already bored. Clint spent most of his time in the archery range practicing with his bow, so Percy was left to find something to entertain himself with. He could have gone to camp to teach classes, or maybe asked some of the new campers coming in to see if they belonged to his cabin. He doubted it though. His father had told him he would warn him if another were coming. He could have called Grover or Nico, but he didn't want to be a bother. Nico was most likely in the underworld helping in the judging pavilion. Apparently Hades thought he needed to get more involved in the workings of the underworld. Grover was most likely with Juniper hanging out in the camp's forest. Even though Tony had channels from 10 different countries and countless movies, none of them held his interest. The games room entertained him momentarily. Already day 3 and he was bored. Sighing, he grabbed a full box of rainbow popsicles and headed down to the pool. Picking one from the box, he stripped off his t-shirt and threw one of the blow-up mats into the pool. Hoisting himself onto it, he sucked on the popsicle and floated around the pool. "Hey, Jarvis, can you turn on Z100 for me?" Percy asked as he floated. "And open the blinds, please." "Right away, Mr. Jackson." Jarvis turned on the requested radio station before opening the blinds. The various different pools, jacuzzis, and water-related relaxation points took up a whole floor. The whole floor walls were practically made of glass. The midday sun flittered in and Percy sighed as it caressed his skin. Paddling over to the edge, he put on a pair of sunglasses before letting himself drift out to the center of the pool. Dipping his free hand into the water, he swirled it around. "You can't just take the whole box," he heard Clint say. Turning to look at the archer, he watched as his friend pulled out one of the popsicles and unwrapped it. The blonde man's brow was tinted with sweat and his thick muscled arms looked rather hard and strained. Percy hadn't stayed mad at Clint about the whole SHIELD putting cameras in camp. They're a team. And besides, Clint could outlast Percy in the silent treatment. Percy shrugged and floated around on the water. He had Jarvis turn off the music before replying. "I'll finish them all eventually." Percy bit of a piece of the flavored ice. "Yeah, but they're mine." Clint snatched up the whole box. "Buy some more," Percy responded. "Why don't you buy your own?" Clint asked. "I don't have a job." Percy shrugged. "I survive off pocket money." His train of thought changed. "I am so bored." Clint looked at the water. "You seem pretty relaxed." "It's all the sugar." Percy shrugged. "I've had 3 cans of soft drink already." "Isn't it supposed to be sugar makes you hyped?" Clint sucked on the popsicle. "Not me." Percy shrugged. "It calms me down a bit." "What are you doing?" "I don't know." Clint shrugged. "I might swim actually. I'll be back." Percy laid on the floating bed for a minute before quickly sliding off the bed and landing with a soft thump on the bottom of the pool. Lying down in the tiles, he sucked on his still dry popsicle. Rolling onto his stomach, he randomly stirred up some water with his finger, creating a little mini underwater tycoon. Clint jumped into the water about 5 minutes later. The archer gazed at Percy, who shot him a sarcastic wave while he ate the popsicle. "Think you can get me another one?" Percy asked, voice surprisingly clear through the water. Clint glared at him before pushing up off the tiled floor. Percy followed suit and pushed up. "How long can you hold your breath?" Clint questioned as he swam over to the side and got out 2 more popsicles. "I've never actually timed. Maybe I should." Percy mused. "I usually just breath normally." "You'd make a good spy," Clint commented lightly. "Not my kind of job. I'll stick to swimming. It's much safer." Percy shrugged. "Why'd you become an agent? Does it have something to do with that carnival ticket Loki sent?" Clint scowled momentarily and thought maybe he had crossed the line. Clint was silent for a moment before responding. "It kind of does. I used to perform in a traveling circus. That didn't work out, so I left and got put on SHIELD's radar." "Seriously? You, the super secret super spy, worked at a carnival?" Percy laughed at the thought. "Got to start somewhere." Clint shrugged unabashed. "I used to scoop poop at the Macy parade." Percy shook out his hair, a sudden idea coming to him. Putting his popsicle to rest on the box, he said, "Have you ever surfed indoors?" "No, have you?" Clint questioned with a raised eyebrow.